would you define what is a financial model?
A model is representation of reality. So a financial model is representing something in real financial world.
Do you think AI will build the models for us in the future?
Stephen Horan is a finance professor at UNC Wilmington and former managing director at the CFA Institute, where he helped scale the CFA program to over 350,000 exams across nearly 200 global test centers. And he's the author of Strategic Value Investing, a book Warren Buffett has recommended 5 years in a row. He's also served on multiple editorial boards, led global learning initiatives for investment professionals, and holds both a PhD in finance.
AI hallucinates so much that on technical things, unless you can dig down and audit it, I'm not sure I want to make a whole lot of important decisions on it because I don't really know how it did what it did.
As you look back over your career, what's the number one lesson you've learned that's helped you the most in your career?
If you're curious about your customer, if you're curious about what your boss really wants, that's what helps you solve people's problems. You're going to be able to use your skills to satisfy their needs.
Do you have a favorite Excel shortcut?
I like Control Left Square Bracket, which takes you to the precedent cell.
Will Excel ever die? Financial Modelers Corner is the world's premier modeling podcast. It is brought to you by Financial Modeling Institute, the world's leading financial modeling accreditation organization. Welcome to Financial Modelers Corner. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A guy. In this podcast, we talk all about the art and science of financial modeling with distinguished financial modelers from around the globe. The Financial Modelers Corner podcast is brought to you by the Financial Modeling Institute. FMI offers the most respected accreditations in financial modeling. And that is why I completed the Advanced Financial Modeler, and I'm currently signed up to do the Chartered Financial Modeler. This week, I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Stephen Horan. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's great to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you. So let me give a little bit about his background. Stephen is an associate professor of finance at UNC Wilmington. Prior to joining the faculty, he was a managing director at CFA Institute, the global professional association of nearly 200,000 investment management professionals, where he led the credentialing division, during which time CFA program registrations increased 70% to over 350,000 examinations annually in more than 140 countries and across nearly 200 test centers. He also led the professional learning division, responsible for delivering to members a world-class post-charter learning experience that allows CFA Institute members to be the best professionals they can be. Prior to joining CFA Institute, Dr. Horan was a full professor of finance at St. Bonaventure University. His diverse, practice-oriented, and award-winning scholarship includes dozens of peer-reviewed publications focusing on diverse areas from investment management to university administration, most of which has been reprinted, summarized, or covered in media. His articles have appeared in peer-reviewed journals, such as the Financial Analyst Journal, Harvard Business Review, Latin America Journal of Financial Research, and others. He has received several research awards, including the coveted Graham and Dodd Reader's Choice Award and 6 research grants. He's also offered several books, including Strategic Value Investing, which has been on Warren Buffett's recommended reading list 5 years in a row. Dr. Horan currently serves on the editorial boards of the Journal of Wealth Management and the Journal of Impact and ESG. He earned his PhD in finance at the State University of New York, Buffalo, and a BBA degree in finance at St. Bonaventure University. How did I do? Did I cover it pretty well?
You did better than I could have.
Sometimes they're easier than others, but it's an impressive background. I enjoyed reading it.
So thanks.
We like to start with this question for everybody. It's kind of our fun question because we've all been there. If you've worked in modeling, you've worked in finance, you have that horror story, that kind of worst model you've had to deal with. So what's your story?
Oh boy. Yeah. So, it's got to come from a student, right? So I had this one model that came with, I think it had 3 embedded circular references, and trying to disentangle and diagnose that is It's a real challenge. A circular reference, you can always get zeroed in, pitch it back, fix it. But when they're embedded and there's 3 of them and no assumptions tabs.
Were you able to ever get it untangled?
No, actually that one I was not able to untangle that one.
Oh yeah, I can believe it. You get some pretty bad stuff, and especially you're always a little more sympathetic. You can understand students as they're trying to learn and the mistakes to happen, but it's still frustrating trying to follow what's going on.
No doubt, no doubt.
So what's the key takeaway from some of those, horror stories or really bad models? What's the takeaway for you as a professor and just as a finance professional?
I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that we'll probably end up talking about today is going to be informed more from the professor side of my experience, but I think the way I'm going to answer that is going to apply equally well to industry, and that's that. You know what? The fundamentals are so important. And what do I mean by that? The assumptions tab, and not having embedded numbers embedded in cells and things like that is just vitally important, because no matter who is going to receive your model, they're going to need to read it. They're going to need to try to understand what you're doing. And, that becomes, it's like writing. It's just that you're writing with a model, and you need to allow people to understand what your thinking was.
It's funny how it always comes back to the basics. As in Schnorr, which Financial Modeling Institute, one of my favorite quotes from him is, "The number one problem far and away is design." It always comes back to design. Like, if you just design it right, it's like people call me and go, "Hey, I got this problem and I got that problem." It's like, no, you have a design problem. You didn't design the model for what you're trying to accomplish. Redesign it and you'll be fine.
I think that's absolutely correct. And keeping it simple is key. Trying to accomplish too much with a single cell or formula is generally not what you want to do. Breaking it down into individual components not only allows you to understand what's going on and make it easier to construct, but when something goes screwy, you can diagnose it a lot better.
Yeah, I've been doing some courses for something I'm working on, and one of the instructors, I love what he says. He goes, "Excel has over 1,000,000 rows and they're free." 'Cause he's a big fan of vertical models. Like, don't be afraid if it goes to 3,000. If you've structured it right and you have good schedules and you're grouping things properly, trust me, they'll appreciate the easy to follow versus putting it in 100 and spending 5 hours trying to understand that one formula.
Exactly.
So that's one of my new favorite quotes. You got over 1,000,000 rows and they're all free. Go ahead and use it.
I'm using that one. I am.
I figured as much, so I'm using it as well. I stole it from CFI. I'll admit that. All right. So this is a question we started asking recently because had somebody asked me on the show, you never define in the show what it is, and I just figured it was table stakes. So I'm like, all right, we'll start asking guests. And it's interesting to see how different the answer can be. How would you define what is a financial model? Like, what do you consider a financial model?
Probably give it a pretty general definition. I mean, what's a model? A model is representation of reality, past, present, or future. You're either trying to explain something or predict something. And so a financial model is representing something in the real financial world. And, if you're forecasting the future, it might be a 3 statement model that you're trying to project. If you're explaining something in the past, you might be doing academic research, or trying to find out what kind of investment strategy worked in the past that might work in the future. So, or if you're doing it in the present, trying to estimate intrinsic value.
It's a great point. I like that. And that's typical what I'm finding is people keep that definition pretty broad. When I taught some basic design principles, I'd start out with what a financial model is. And just to show how different they can be, I would take the Fed Reserve's definition of financial model. And you almost have to have a PhD to understand the words they use. You're just like, okay, really? Did we have to make it this difficult? Who wrote this? From, a more general. And then I'd take a very broad from somebody who had written a book and worked in modeling. And I'm like, I tend to lean toward the broad. And let's keep it very general. And there's no reason for it to be highly technical. We do enough of that in finance.
Exactly, exactly. And we'll get into this, but it doesn't have to be complicated either. And that I think is part of the instructional value of having financial models.
Well, and I agree. And, a basic 3-statement model that can be efficient can have what, 10, 15 different functions at most? You can do 90% what you're doing in a model with 10 different functions. It doesn't need to be complex. Now, yes, there are complex models, and there's times when you have to do complex formulas. We all love the idea of keeping them all extremely simple, but we all know there are times it gets complex. But if you start simple, like I like to say, build it simple because your business will make it complex for you, whether you want it to be or not. So if you start out complex, you're screwed.
Totally. That's good. That's a good way to think about it.
So I know you have a very unique background. You've done a lot of both academic and professional work and experience. How has that combination helped you throughout your career?
I think it's helped. I'm not, it certainly helped. It's hurt in some ways, but not in ways I care about. And, I definitely sort of have this practical or, side to my academic research. I have this academic side to my practical stuff. And, so I'm kind of persona non grata to the hardcore academics, and I'm a little bit of a pencil neck to the, hardcore practitioners. All right. But really, for me, I feel like it's the way I add value to both those worlds. And, it's very easy to, get steeped in one or the other and not see the value in the other's world. But, it's just, I don't know that it's anything I planned to sort of try to be that bridge builder. It's just where I've felt comfortable. I remember like my first job, an asset manager. I was on the trading desk, and every day the sales guys would come into the trading desk at the end of the day and say, "How'd we do today?" And they'd be hopping on the Bloomberg machine and hitting up quotes to see how our holdings were doing, frankly, just getting in my way. And so, I was like, you know what I'm going to do, guys? Let me build you an index so that you don't have to get in my way. And every day at 4:15, I'll deliver you how we did in the aggregate with an index. And that was actually a much more difficult job than I thought it was going to be. I never knew anything about building indexes, but I learned. And very few people would think to do that or maybe want to do that, but I found that stuff interesting.
Great example. And I'm sure they all appreciated it once they had it. It's like, oh, I don't got to go bother even at 4:15, 4:20 for my numbers. And I'm sure you appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was definitely self-preservation, no doubt.
Yeah. I think that's why probably 95% of people that learn VBA learn it is self-preservation. I got to figure out how to do this. I'm tired of doing this manually. I will find a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you spent a large portion of your career in academics. You've worked at St. Bonaventure, CFA, which is educating people, not necessarily academics, but education focused, UNC Wilmington. What is it you love about teaching and educating others about helping others learn?
It's fun for me, one, just to sort of try to explain stuff, but it's really fun when you see the light bulbs go off. And occasionally what happens is kind of what happened to me when I was young. I didn't know I was going to get into finance or investments. It wasn't, I was going to be a sociology major. And I just kind of, you go through college because you don't know what it is you want to do. And you explore different things. And I found something that I really enjoyed. And sometimes you just find a student that's like, oh my God, I had no idea. This is a lot of fun. And when they become passionate, they're going to be successful, whatever that means to them. So, that ends up changing lives, and it's difficult not to feel really good about that.
100% agree. I love when, I'm teaching somebody and Eric, you mean if I learn this tool, I could save like 2 days a month and it's not that much work. Yeah. And then you see their face like, oh, maybe I'll actually invest the time now when they realize what it can do for them. Do you have a favorite light bulb moment as you look kind of back at your careers, or maybe one or two experiences that just really stand out to you?
I'll give you a recent one. I have, and I say have, right, right now, a Turkish student who was a dance major of all things. And, she just, I don't know how she found her way into one of my classes, but she did. And honestly, a little bit over her head, to be honest, but she loves the stuff. And I'm not even quite sure why, but now she's doing a 180 and, tooling up and, she's found her passion.
That's one you don't see often. You don't think from dance to finance and modeling.
No, she still has a ways to go, but you can tell how motivated she is. And, that's awesome. And then, I mean, here's another recent one. I've had a couple now of academic careers because I keep going back and forth. In my first academic career at St. Bonaventure University, really just a delightful place to, teach and to be and to develop relationships with students. And, some of them become successful. And one of them is the chief investment officer of a trust company here in North Carolina. And I was teaching a portfolio management course this summer, and they came in as a guest speaker. And so, to sort of see this virtuous circle, take place over time, it's quite an arc.
No, that's really rewarding. I mean, the example that came to mind as you shared that when you say seeing it come to pass is I'd spent years working with youth in scouting, Boy Scouting and stuff. And, now I see some of them with their kids. And it's kind of that moment of where they start to appreciate kind of what you did, and you start to see how successful they are and what they've accomplished. And it's been really rewarding. I've got to see a number of them now that are, married and have kids, and similar type thing, a little different situation, but that type of moment where like, oh wow, it did turn out good. This is rewarding because there's some of them you always wonder about.
That's exactly right. And, I think, part of that for me, I think, and I feel like I need to say this as you're sort of bringing these things up. I mean, I benefited from people that were willing to light fires and spend time with me. And my mentors, my biggest mentor, Jeff Peterson, was massively brilliant and an expert in derivative securities. Not alive anymore, but he's, I like to think that, my life is different because he invested so much in me.
Love that. Sounds like he was an amazing person.
No doubt.
We all need those in our lives. When we talk about teaching, when you and I chatted, one of the things you mentioned is you talk about how taking concepts and converting them into models often helps people learn better and makes more sense. Why do you think that is? Why have you kind of found that to be the case?
Yeah. I think it boils down to the fact that it's active. There's not a lot of people that just like to sit there and absorb stuff. And, some learn that way, but most people learn more indelibly when they're actively engaged, and models allow them to do that. And when those models and activities are grounded in practice, then it becomes very experiential and very motivating because now they're like, okay, I can see how this is going to be relevant. And then, and I see students come back from interviews or whatever. And, you can only say, and be so convincing that, hey, I've got this GPA or I took this class, but when you say I built this model, that's a completely different thing. And you can talk about how you built that model and how you solved the problems to build that model. That's compelling. And that's what industry likes. And when when a student gets kind of the whiff of that, and because most students tend to be very job motivated,
For good reason.
then now they're invested and now they'll listen.
Well, my background is in FP&A. I am also passionate about financial modeling. Like many financial modelers, I was self-taught. Then I discovered the Financial Modeling Institute, the organization that offers the Advanced Financial Modeler program. I am a proud holder of the AFM. Preparing for the AFM exam made me a better modeler. If you want to improve your modeling skills, I recommend the AFM program. Podcast listeners save 15% on the AFM program. Just use code podcast. That's one of the reasons I'm such a big proponent of what Financial Modeling Institute is doing. Is right. That entire program is go demonstrate you can build a model. It's something you can show an employer. Look, I passed the advanced financial modeler. I'm comfortable building a 3-statement model. Right? Everybody can model on their resume. But if I pull 10 models from those 10 people, I doubt all 10 of them are going to be well designed. In fact, maybe 1 or 2, right? Many of them you're going to be looking at and going, guess it's a model. And so I love that you do it that way. Cause yeah, it is so valuable. I wish when I started my career that somebody had taught me how to model before I went out there and just try to guess in Excel.
Yeah, no doubt. And, we get sort of anchored in Excel, and I don't mean that pejoratively in any way, but the reality is I think that what we're actually getting anchored in is spreadsheets, and they're visual, and you can see stuff. And now, as they get better with the programming and the interface, things can light up and you get different colors, and that people see stuff, and a lot of people are visual learners. And I think that's another answer to your question about why are these effective teaching tools.
Yeah. I mean, I think right. All the data shows the average person remembers something presented visually much easier than they do a number or, something they read or something they heard, right? If I tell you a big long number or I show you what it means on a screen, you're much more likely to remember what I showed you.
No doubt. Where I think sometimes students run into trouble is when they try to backward engineer a model. So they'll take a complete model and try to use it for their situation that it wasn't necessarily built for. And they're like, well, why doesn't it work? And then they get frustrated because they're trying to shortcut it. And so, if you can get them over that hump.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. And that's why, like we said earlier, design is so important. When you learn how to properly design a model and what goes into your inputs, your outputs, your assumptions, your calculations, your schedules, then you don't need some template that you got to back engineer. There may be times you use one, but you understand the different components. So you're not just trying to force it to get the answer. You're laying it out and you're like, oh, this goes here and that goes there. And I don't know, there's just so much value. And part of that is just experience, right? You're not going to have all that coming out of school. There's just something for said when you've built dozens and dozens of models, you just start to understand, oh, I really should do this. Oh, this is why that check's important.
Absolutely.
As much as we'd love for the students to be able to exit and have it all figured out, there's nothing beats just experience sometimes. Sometimes you just got to hit your head against the wall, so to speak.
So I guess, to that point, there's no shortcut to, investing some time and, getting your hands dirty. I feel like what we can do is we can shorten the distance from point A to point B, rather than having somebody stare at a blank spreadsheet without understanding and how any of the, menus or formulas work. But
No, 100% agree. Like, that's kind of, when I start, like I said, when I first built models in a finance role, it was just go figure it out. Versus if you've taught someone the basics, you've shortened that point A to point B a lot.
I think that's really a key component. And that is that if if you can't, it's kind of like giving somebody a fishing pole rather than a fish, right? And that is, if you can give them the experience of one, building a model, and two, figuring some stuff out for themselves. Now they're like, oh my God, I've done that. And I don't have to have the answer next time I got to go build a model. I can figure it out. I know how I got the answers to the questions I had before, and let me go down similar paths.
It's a great point. How do you think, or what do you think is really the key to helping students be ready when they go into the workplace to be able to build a basic model? Obviously, like I said, there's a level of experience, but what are the things you think of as a professor that you feel like, okay, I've prepared the students well? What do you think they need to kind of feel comfortable as they go out into the workplace?
I think we've touched on some of them, and that is, know one, how you can leverage other models. And yeah, it's kind of like object oriented programming where you're like, okay, I'm going to take this piece and sort of have a way to fill in the gaps and answer the questions. Well, I need to accomplish this. Can I describe that well enough so that I can go find the answer? I mean, whether that's in a Google search, or, in some other way, being able to articulate the need is very important. But they need to have some experience to be able to do that, which also gives them the confidence to be able to do that.
That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that. So I want to shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about the education side, but I also want to talk a little bit about your time at CFA Institute. I know you spent 14 years there before now, kind of going back to academics. What was that experience like? Like maybe talk a little bit about your time at CFA Institute. I'd love to learn a little more there.
Yeah, it was great experience. Really loved it. And the reason I went there was because I started my first academic career very early. And if you don't do anything else, you're going to be working a long time. And academic careers oftentimes end very, very much the way they began. So it gave me something, it gave me a chance to do something different. It definitely scratched the where theory meets practice itch. And what was great is that the people there, I worked with wonderful people, highly talented, um, very wonderful people. And I got to work with a lot of industry luminaries, Bob Litterman, Roger Ibbotson, V. Bodie, Bill Sharp, people that, I just really wouldn't have had an opportunity to work with. And so that's a pleasure in unto itself, but also a lot of practitioners. It got me far closer to industry than I ever did, and really kind of got me more focused on, continuing education that has practical application. How is a client going to see the difference in the fact that you've learned this, right? And how are you going to is your recommendation going to be different? Is the way you're interacting with the client going to be different? That kind of stuff. And so there's a discipline to it because not it's not an academic freedom kind of a thing. It's like you've got a customer who has a need and you need to solve, you need to, satisfy that need. And I think the other thing that was really great about CFA Institute was it's a global enterprise in every sense of the word. And that was, so I traveled a lot, which was super enjoyable. But just met a lot of people from around the globe and got a much better sense of both the differences and the similarities in across financial markets. So very, mind expanding in that sense. But it's a great experience, and there's not a lot of organizations quite like CFA Institute, largely because of that, global remit. Most other professional bodies tend to be regional or national.
Yeah, no, they've been around for decades and they are global. I remember I did level 1 of the CFA, I want to say 2013, and just realized for me, I wasn't going to go the investment route. It just didn't make sense to continue. So I didn't finish it. But I remember, yeah, how many different people there were in that test center and all the time I put in the experience. And it was a good learning experience. I don't regret doing level one at all. And so, that gave me an appreciation for just the scope and size and the amount of rigor that's put into that whole process. Because it's definitely one of the hardest, I think, credentials out there. It's definitely not easy to earn.
No, it is, and you're right about that. And I caution students, encouraging as I'll be to a student if that has the right interest to go pursue a CFA charter, I'm going to be very candid that you got to be prepared because it's not for the faint of heart.
Well, it's definitely a big commitment. And, I'm curious. I know a few years ago, they made some major changes. They overhauled some of the program. They added the practicum section, which is financial modeling was in there. I think there was you could choose a Python path. There are a couple different paths. Kind of what's your thoughts of the changes? How do you see those?
Yeah, so that happened after I left, and I love it. We were talking about stuff like that though before I left, and that's where I met Ian. And what I like about it is that it complements what the CFA program has to offer, both in terms of its strengths and its weaknesses, right? CFA program, it's tough to improve upon the book knowledge that it provides. And, and it's very broad based because you're just going to learn about and that's one of the things I tell students is like, you can sit down for an econ test and that's going to be, on chapters 3 through 7 or whatever. And you can sit down for an investments test on a small set of chapters. But when you do the CFA, you're sitting down for all the chapters in all those courses at the same time. And
You got to have all those formulas memorized, and
that's a big pill. And so it's very academic, but when you're administering an exam to, back when I was there, 350,000 candidates, today it's about 250,000 candidates, but still 250,000. It's very difficult to test and assess hands-on, what's sometimes called high fidelity learning, and so the practical, what do they call them? Professional modules are awesome for that. And the FMI module is perfect. I think most CFA candidates should probably choose that path because it's so foundational in terms of everything that they do. And that's, what Ian and I were talking about is, how can we get this skill set into more CFA charter holders' hands? Because, saying, hey, if, networking capital goes up, what does that do to cash flow? Okay, I can develop a test question on that. But being able to model that stuff is ultimately what employers need. And so on that point, that was the bane of CFA Institute's, offering. And the critique that employers had is like, great, you're building book smarts with these candidates, but I need them to do stuff. And the professional skills modules get them to do stuff. And FMI is awesome about that.
Yeah, I know. And that's how I feel. I thought it was a huge benefit when they made that change. I was like, finally, this just feels right because it complements what's going on there. Like you said, the practical with the book smart, because you need both.
Definitely.
Bad financial models can lead to bad decisions, or worse. So, how do you minimize the risk of a bad model? You make sure the models you build are great. Financial Modeling Institute developed the Advanced Financial Modeler Accreditation Program to help modelers like you. The AFM program offers a step-by-step approach to building world-class financial models. The program ensures that you know the best practices in model design and structure. and will help you brush up on your Excel and accounting skills too. Be the one on your team to build great models. If you want to impress your boss and your clients, get AFM accredited. Podcast listeners, save 15% on the AFM program. Just use code podcast at fminstitute.com/podcast. All right, so we're going to switch gears here a little bit. We have some standard questions we ask every guest, designed to have a little bit of fun here. The first, it's a modeling podcast, which means we all use Excel or Google Sheets sometimes, but we all use a spreadsheet. It's generally Excel. So do you have a favorite Excel shortcut? Is there one that's just kind of stuck out to you?
So yeah, I'm basically Excel. I like control, left bracket, control left square bracket, which takes you to the precedent cell. So when I'm trying to understand a model and grade students, just going down the pipeline, where do they get this from? Critical.
Yeah, no, that's a favorite of a number of people. If you're doing any kind of auditing or trying to trace things out, control left bracket, a lot of people then be F5 to go back. That combo is huge. So as you look back over your career, what's the number one lesson you've learned that's helped you the most in your career?
I like that you use the word learn, and I would call it curiosity, because sometimes, we don't think about curiosity as something that you learn, but I had to learn it. I was one of those guys. Is this going to be on the test? Because if it's not, I really don't have time for it. And I was the least curious kid of the lot. But once I learned to be curious, I realized that, that's what helps you solve people's problems. If you're curious about your customer, if you're curious about what your boss really wants, you're going to be able to use your skills to satisfy their needs. And now all of a sudden you're adding value and the world just opens up.
I love the way you explain that. And I love the emphasis that being curious can be learned.
No doubt. I had to be pretty conscious about doing it as well.
And I appreciate that, because I'm sure you're much more of a curious person now.
Definitely. It's definitely more of a reflex. So, and that, you build muscles like anything, right? You're modeling muscle. It'll weaken if you don't exercise it all the time. But once it's exercised, it's a reflex.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's like anything. If you don't do it, you lose it. But if you continue to do it, it just becomes stronger and stronger. All right, so this is a fun one we like to ask everyone. What's the most unique, most fun thing you've created a model for in your personal life?
So this is an interesting one, and it actually goes back to this thing, we're trying to tie together theory and practice. So I had a very special person in my life, a father figure in my life who had retired and pretty wealthy, started to take money out of his retirement accounts. And I'm like, why are you doing that? He goes, because I'm retired. I'm like, but you got all this cash in taxable accounts. And, I'm like, it just doesn't why don't you keep that stuff tucked away in your tax deferred vehicles, let that, grow and all that. And psychologically, it just wasn't what he wanted to do. And I was like, I've got to figure out a way to show him and others that there's an optimal way to get money out of retirement accounts. And that just started an entire line of research that a large part of my academic career ended up being built on.
Yeah. And so did you end up building him a model to show the amounts he was like the benefit? And what's his response when he saw the numbers?
I did.
What was his response when he saw it?
And I got to show him the paper after it got published. No. It didn't matter to him.
Yeah, there's some people like, this is the way I want to do it. I don't care. I'm rich, rich enough that I can do it either way, and I'm going to be fine.
No, I think that's right. And then the other thing I learned is, you know what? You can't get wrapped up in those discussions with family, especially parents. My mom would never listen to anything I had to say when it came to investments.
Yeah, no, I hear you. There's definitely some areas or family you're just like, all right, you're gonna do what you do. I'm just gonna step back and let you learn.
No, that's exactly right.
All right, so we're moving into what we call the rapid fire section of this. So here's how it works. I know I shared some of the ground rules, but we'll lay them out. The idea here is you can't say it depends because you could probably say it depends to almost every single one of these. You have to pick a side and then you can elaborate on the end on one or two of them you're most passionate about. Like, hey, here's the nuance. Here's why I picked what I did, but here's the exceptions. Also, we've added a new element. Somebody asked for this recently. They go, can I have a plead the fifth on one question? So if there's one question you don't want to answer for whatever reason, you can just say, I plead the fifth, and we'll let you off the hook instead of saying it depends. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do
All
it.
right. Circular references and models, yes or no?
Yes.
VBA.
No.
Horizontal or vertical? You want lots of sheets or all on one sheet?
Horizontal.
All righty. Dynamic arrays in models, yes or no?
Yes.
What about fully dynamic models, like using dynamic arrays for the entire model?
No.
All right. External workbook links, yes or no?
Yes. These
Alrighty.
these are hard.
They are. And it's fun because I'm getting a few different answers from you than we typically get. We'll discuss that at the end. Named ranges, yes or no?
Yes.
All righty. Do you follow a formal standards like, fast or smart or one of those when you're modeling?
No.
All righty. Do you think financial modelers should learn Python and Excel?
No.
What about Power Query? Power BI?
No.
All right. Will Excel ever die?
No.
I either get no or yes, but I hope it's not in my lifetime. Do you think AI will build the models for us in the future?
No.
Okay. Do you believe financial models are the number one corporate decision-making tool?
Yes.
All righty. And what is your lookup function of choice? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, it's index.
All righty. So you're an index fan. I like it. All right. So I'll give you an opportunity. Is there one or two of those you want to elaborate on?
Yeah. So which one do I want to elaborate on? The VBA. So I said no. And I think largely that's an artifact of more my academic teacher thing is because I actually, want students to struggle a little bit with building the models. I think that's part of the learning. I mean, one of the things about Excel, which makes it awesome, is that it's not a black box. And so if I'm asking them to build an efficient frontier, right, they got to go through and it's not just, oh, what's my expected return? What's my variance covariance matrix and throw that in. They got to know what to do with them. They got to get those things calculated and then they've got to go figure out how to maximize things subject to constraints. And I love that they have to struggle a little. I love that. And that's not efficient from a commercial perspective, but it's effective from a learning perspective.
And I would agree with that. Yeah. When you have to struggle, you learn more. But there are times when your boss is like, you've struggled enough, get it done, so to speak, in the real world.
Mhm.
Is there one other you'd like to elaborate on your answer?
The Power Query in Power BI. Power BI it's a nice commercial tool, and I do think it's valuable, but there's two distinct skill sets that I think are valuable, and that one is financial modeling as we sort of think about it, and then the other is dealing with relational databases. And Excel's not great as a platform for relational databases.
Yep.
And there's other platforms that are better for that. And that's where you should be using those tools in those platforms.
Okay. Yeah, no, I got it. And there's definitely understanding relational databases can provide a lot of value when you're dealing with data all the time.
Yeah. And that's where I think you want to be doing your querying and your reporting and all that. Because I feel like if the tool, and this is kind of like where AI comes into play, AI hallucinates so much that on technical things that, unless you can, you know, dig down and audit it, I'm not sure I want to make a whole lot of decisions, important decisions on it, because I don't really know how it did what it did. If it's writing a poem, that's delightful. I don't need to audit
Who
that.
cares if he uses this word or that word in a poem?
Exactly. Exactly. But, I'm they say, yeah, they'll solve all these problems, but I think we're running up to some limits about what AI is able to accomplish. So we'll see where it goes, but you know, I don't I saw somebody throw like a bunch of financial statements into a tool and say, give me a ratio analysis of these financial statements. Okay. And it gave me what looked like a ratio analysis, but I have no idea if those numbers were correct.
Yeah, you always have to be able to validate things. Nothing, nothing takes that away. You need to have a high level of confidence it's right. Now, there are times where tools, hey, they've been used by thousands, all the numbers are there. You can feel comfortable like a Bloomberg terminal pulling back for certain ratios or stuff. There's a level where you should be able to just get comfortable, but you need to make sure you have that comfort so that you know it's right. Because the last thing you want to do is throw something that's wrong in front of people.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
So I've unfortunately done that more than once in my career. It's never fun. So if you could offer one piece of advice to our audience to be a better financial modeler, what would be your one piece of advice?
To be a better financial modeler, not learn it for the first time.
Well, let's do it. Learn it for the first time. I'd love your advice on that. We don't get that often. You're a professor. I think that's a good one. What would you give as advice for those first learning to model?
I think if you're first learning to model, you just got to be willing to get your hands dirty, and then the basics then are hyper important. Use cell references and don't embed numbers into your formulas, that kind of stuff. And then, I think even for the experienced ones is, study other people's models, and I think both those things fall under the heading of getting your hands dirty. And you can't be afraid to make a mistake. You can always audit it. You can always check it, but just try something. It's not glass in, a crystal shop or anything like that. We can break stuff. It's not a problem.
I like that. So be willing to experiment, be willing to break, make sure you learn. All right. So if our audience wants to learn more about you or potentially get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably, anyone's able to reach out to me via email. It's horan@uncw.edu. My personal email is steven.m.horan@gmail. So follow me on LinkedIn for sure. And X, those are my two more active platforms.
Took me a second. I still think in Twitter terms like X. That's right. That's Twitter.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. I really enjoyed chatting with you and getting to learn a little bit more about you. And I'm confident our audience will enjoy it as well. So thank you for carving out some time for us.
Thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks. Financial Modeler's Corner was brought to you by the Financial Modeling Institute. This year, I completed the Advanced Financial Modeler certification, and it made me a better financial modeler. What are you waiting for? Visit FMI at www.fminstitute.com/podcast and use code podcast to save 15% when you enroll in one of the accreditations today.